ladies, as you all can tell, are amazing. They are a force unto themselves, and they have partnered together to talk about another force. And I'm just honored and grateful to have them here today, as I just said a few moments ago. So, as I said, this story mattered to me because 4 years ago, when I came upon the story of Miss Mason, I was just awe-inspired about her life. I want to just talk about, I want to start with you, Dana,
Sure.
and because you wrote it, if you could pull over this way with me, Annie, so I can, see you, that would be great. Talk to us about when you learned about the story and what about her life compelled you to write about her?
At the time I discovered Biddy Mason, I was living downtown on the corner of Main and 6th Street, and I would walk, and I walked downtown and I saw this piece of artwork, an installation about her life, and I just was shocked because I had never heard of this woman who had apparently been integral to the growth of Los Angeles. And so I started thinking about not only who she was, but the very fact that I did not have access to her story. And as a fiction writer, that's where I live and breathe. This idea of like, if I have some sort of power as a writer to have a discussion of any kind, then I'm compelled to do that. And so she was somebody that I was awed by, impressed by her journey, impressed by her sort of like just the power of her life. And so I decided I would try and write about her, but not in a sort of scholarly way. I'm a fiction writer. So my job, or what I was interested in, was animating her life through fiction, making her live and breathe in a way that, again, brought her back to life, that her story isn't dead, that she isn't dead, but when we read about her, she lives and breathes. And that was important to me. So that's how that story came about.
And then from the time that you learned of her to the time you started writing about her, what was the distance there?
It was quite a while because I had to do a lot of research. It started out, there was an older story about Henry Edward Huntington, who built the building that I was living in at the time, Pacific Electric Lofts on Main Street. And I got to thinking about how his name is everywhere: Huntington Beach, Huntington Library, Huntington everything. And Biddy Mason was this person that had a huge imprint on Los Angeles, but her name wasn't on very many things, if any things at all. So I had started that story about him, but when I discovered Biddy, I thought, wait a minute, there's a way to talk about both things. The idea that only certain kinds of people's stories are known to us. Wealthy white men, for example. And so the story was a combination of the two of their narratives, both of their narratives, hopefully underscoring this idea that, you know, the American story is that so many American stories are lost or sort of like purposely obliterated or purposely not told. And I was comparing and contrasting their lives to that one short story. But it was a long short story, something like more than 30 pages.
Wow.
And so, you know, I was doing research about like what Los Angeles must have been like during the time of Biddy. And so the other thing that I got to thinking about too is when I was reading the Henry Edward Huntington biography, there was a letter by his uncle written to him, and at the time Huntington was trying to be
Do me a favor, hold that thought. When we come forward, you can tell us about the letter. I am Mischa Duffie. My guests are Dana Johnson and Annie Loui, and we're talking about the new stage play, The Story of Biddy Mason, one woman who really changed a lot about Los Angeles, but we don't hear a lot about it. And today you get to. This is KBLA Talk 1580.
Stay tuned for more of The Backstory. With Mischa Duffie on KBLA Talk 1580. Hi,
Hi, Tavis Smiley here. We're getting closer to June 18th, and time is running out for you to register to join us for our historic symposium live on C-SPAN, Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Admission is free, but you must register at KBLA1580.com right now if you want to be in the audience when the nation will see for the first time ever a stage full of brilliant black folk talking about the urgency of now. Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. It's all going down. Well, it's actually all going up. Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. live from the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Again, admission is free, but we're filling up fast. So if I were you, I would log on right now to KBLA1580.com to reserve your seat. Caring about the climate, caring about the community. We're KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Our daughter Jessie loves playing detective.
A clue.
But since we discovered she has sensitive skin, we've been playing detective too.
We thought the problem was our puppy.
But it was actually our old detergent.
Aha.
So we switched to Tide Free and Gentle. Tide cleans better than the leading competitive free detergent, and it doesn't leave behind irritating residues.
Plus, Tide Free and Gentle has no dyes or perfumes, so it's gentle on her skin.
Case closed.
If it's got to be clean, it's got to be Tide Free and Gentle.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chucha's Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, banking with Capital One is the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Kind of like choosing Derek Jeter as the pinch hitter for your baseball team.
Jeter, you're in. We need a home run.
I'll give it a try. I've swung a bat once or twice.
That's out of here. Yep, even easier than that. With no fees or minimums and no overdraft fees, is it even a decision? That's banking reimagined. What's in your wallet?
Terms apply. See CapitalOne.com/bank for details. Capital One and a member FDIC.
Follow the leader.
KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Got your black.
Keep following the leader.
Oh my God.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Every story has a backstory. You're listening to The Backstory. With Mischa Duffie on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are indeed listening to Mischa Duffie, and I am so happy to have you here again. Happy weekend. Before I move forward, I do want to pause. We're talking about lives and we're talking about history, and I don't want to move forward without acknowledging that today is the 4-year anniversary of the murder of our brother George Floyd, and it is, when we think about what happened to him and what has happened since, some of the same has happened, but there have been some changes. And so we're grateful for the changes that have been made, but we also continue to press forward to the changes that need to happen. And we just send our love and our thoughts and prayers out to his family and his daughter as they continue the work of making sure that his memory matters and that Black folk cannot be treated any kind of way. That said, I want to pivot back to my conversation. I am in conversation with writer Dana Johnson and director Annie Loui. We're talking about their creation, the stage play, The Story of Biddy Mason. And before we came forward, Dana was telling us about a letter that she had read from Henry Edward Huntington's nephew. So I want you
Yes, it was his uncle, and Huntington had said he came from money, but he was trying to make his own way. And he thought he would take work as like a porter or something on a train. And his uncle had written him that it would be better that you work for free than to take such a job that was beneath you, you know. And I got to thinking about all of the Black folks in this country who built this country, who, quote, worked for free, all right, who, you know, without anything given to them. And so, again, just contrasting those two stories I thought was very important. So that's part of how the story came to be.
Yeah. Now, when you first started writing about her, particularly as it relates to this production, what did you know you wanted to tell? Because there's a lot to her.
Yeah.
And a lot to her story.
Mm-hmm. I guess just the idea of survival and not mere survival, but like making one's self. How do you do that? And also I was interested in California as a native-born Los Angelino, just interested in sort of part of the mythology of, like, you know, California and coming west and finding oneself, but also how problematic that was, because in California, slavery was still it was still happening. But Biddy did find a way to free herself. So I was just kind of just talking about those complicated stories, like the mythology of California, the mythology of the, quote, self-made white man, for example, and you've already got stuff. You don't have much to make. And so, I was just playing with that. Those two stories I thought were really, those three were really important to tell in the story.
And I could have asked you this earlier, but it occurs to me to ask you now, what do you get from writing? I'm a writer as well, but all of us have a different thing that pulls us in. What do you actually get from writing as a writer?
That is such a hard question. It's just a compulsion. I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Some of us feel the need to do it and some of us don't. And I always have wanted to tell stories. And I guess when I think about it, part of my growing up when I was young, my parents are from the South. They're from Tennessee. And when I was really little, I was one of those kids who just sat in the room and listened to adults tell stories, just became invisible because I loved hearing them talk about their lives and what they used to do and the ways they spoke and that Southern Black vernacular. I feel like that was sort of like the beginning of my wanting to tell stories. I loved hearing stories. I loved the language. And I wanted to sort of be that. I wanted to embody story in that way. So I guess that's where it all began.
Yeah, because I know as a writer, it's something about where writing takes you and how it allows you to leave yourself and explore more of yourself, and it allows you to give people an experience they otherwise may not have. And as I said a moment ago, every writer's reason is different for why they write, and that's why I always like that question, because you get a variety of answers. But it's just an amazing opportunity to just be one with a story, with a character, with yourself, again, in ways that you didn't know. And so then we have Miss Annie Loui, who we will introduce into the conversation. Again, in terms of a partnership, how did the two of you come along together? How did you all meet? I know you have the UC Irvine in common, but talk to us about how you all came together.
Shall I pick that one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I had some friends over to dinner, and a writer friend was at dinner, and he handed me a book of short stories. He said, I think you ought to read these. And I went, oh, short stories. I don't like short stories. He said, read this. So I read it. And then I called him up and I said, I really like the last story a lot. And I want to turn it into a counterbalance piece.
Wow.
I want to make that into a physical theater piece because it's so moving to me. And it was Dana's story of Biddy Mason. And my writer friend said, well, here's the secret. I gave you that book because I wanted you to get to know her. And I wanted you to turn this into a theater piece.
Wow.
Yeah. He said, I know your work. I knew you'd really like this.
He knew it'd resonate with you.
Yeah. And it was completely right. And at that point, I said, okay, give me that writer's phone number.
So what about it in particular resonated with you? Was it her writing style? Was it the story? What did you feel in common with her?
Yeah, it was both. I mean, the story itself was so moving to me because I'm not from LA and I've spent the 30 years I've lived in LA trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
And this story...
This is an interesting place to figure out.
Yeah, right? So this story, I went, oh, this is such a good story, too.
Yes.
You know, this is somebody who went through so much and then continued not to just to be a success in herself, but to help people.
Yes.
And I found that there was something really beautiful in hearing that story in these days.
Yeah.
It just felt super important to me. And Dana's writing style, I will
Yes.
say, she was doing something kind of epic with this story, and it gave it this sense of enormity in history. It felt like something in time that was very important. And I liked that idea too. I thought, yep, this is not just a good story about one person. This actually resonates for this city through time. And the end of the story, the way Dana writes it, is not just about Biddy. It's about now and what we've lost and what we remember. And how can Biddy continue to inspire us, in fact.
And I think that's the powerful part. How can she continue to inspire us? And one of the ways that she continues to inspire us is, you said a moment ago, Dana, she not only found herself on the other side of being enslaved when she came to LA, she made herself, right? And she was not so dismantled in enslavement that she couldn't find her way to herself. And it wasn't just her. She had 3 daughters. So she was being a mom in the midst of really discovering her power, who she was and who she could be. And she came from what some would say nothing to becoming a businesswoman, a philanthropist, an author, an entrepreneur, and the founder of Fame, a church that we know is really, really popular and has had a powerful pulpit. We're going to talk about that some more. But I love her life, and I love that you all are reminding us that we can be whatever we decide we want to be. So that said, let's talk about the making of the production and Annie, how you saw this coming forth, because I saw the clip. I don't get to see it in person until this Friday, and I can't wait to see it. But I saw the clip, and I was really, really moved by the way you decided to direct this production. Did the two of you talk about that? How did that part come to be?
No, Annie, this is Annie's production. Early on, we worked together writing some of it because I'm not a theater person at all. I didn't really know how to translate
into
my short story into what Annie needed. So I was very tentative, and we just I dabbled. I did a little of this and a little of that to, like, if Annie felt like she needed my hand or vision in that particular moment.
Yeah.
But for the most part, this is Annie's world. And so Annie, you should talk about how you do that.
Now, wait a minute. Before you do that, how did you feel, Dana, relinquishing your vision and your writing to her? Because I imagine sometimes as a writer, your story can get lost in translation, right? How did you feel about relinquishing that to her?
I trusted Annie. I feel like she knows writers, and I wasn't the first writer that Annie had adapted. And I also feel like It's like when someone makes a film of a book or a novel or short story, whatever, that's a separate thing. And so I'd already written my story, and my story is my writing, and that's what I do and how I do it. Somebody else's sort of creative take on it, I wasn't so sort of like territorial about it in that way. My only concern was just that people would see how incredible Biddy Mason was as a person. So however that looks is fine with me. That's just,
incredible she is. I can't say that enough. So when we come forward, Annie, because I don't want you to start and then we have to stop. So I want you to just have full reign to just go and tell us all about how you produced it. And then I also want to just introduce our listeners more to who Biddy Mason was. I want the two of you to really talk more about her life and her story and how, what she found when she found herself and what she did here in LA. This is KBLA Talk 1580. I am Mischa. You are in the backstory. I am Mischa Duffie. This is the backstory, and my guests are writer Dana Johnson and director choreographer Annie Loui. They are the creators of the stage play, The Story of Biddy Mason. Biddy Mason is an amazing woman who was once enslaved, but on the other side of enslavement. I love the way that Dana put it. She said that Biddy Mason found herself and she also made herself, and she really did. And so before we get into really unpacking her life, I would like for you, Annie, to continue to talk about the production and the making of the production and why you decided to do it the way that you did.
Oh, boy. All right. Well, what I do is my skill set is actually in movement. So I've always been in theater, but I do a lot of dance, and I teach some kinds of physical improvisation, a little bit of mime, and I put all that together and created a style of physical theater where people become many, many things in telling a story. So one actor will become many, many different characters and also play a dog and also play tumbleweed and also play a cart that is turning and also play architecture. So it's a kind of a storytelling where I take a finite group of actors, in this case 7, and they become all the different parts of the story, so that we can transform an empty stage into a complete theatrical event. So you've got things that happen historically through time. We can do whatever we want.
Wow. Wow. Now, when did you start doing this kind of work?
Well, the truth of the matter is we've been doing young audience shows this week, and one of the teachers asked the actors when they started acting, they said, in my room with my dolls, And I have to say, I think I started it in my room with my dolls. But truthfully, I grew up being in plays a lot when I was in school, and then I decided that my career really was in dance. And I ended up having incredible opportunities, found some scholarships, got myself to Europe, studied with some really wonderful people in Paris. I studied mime. I studied dance at the Paris Opera. I got very lucky and got very inspired by the early dance theater scene that was beginning at that time in Europe. And a lot of it was something very similar, where you started expanding the ideas of what dance and theater were and started blending both of them together. So I came back to the States and started making work. Started with a piece called Jane Eyre. Great story, and condensed down 700 pages to a 30-page script. So we don't use a lot of words. But there's a lot of action.
And in action are words, and action is language. Action is language for sure. That's what I really want to say. And when you were telling the story about how when a friend shared with you Dana's book, you kind of were not as interested because you don't really do short stories, but you got to that last story and it was something about the story that compelled you to say, I want to meet her. I want to talk to her. Talk to us about that.
It's just the story when I'm looking for a piece to base a new physical theater work on, I'm looking for something that is so compelling to me that I can't forget it. So I'm not usually starting by looking. I just read a lot. And then I don't think about it much. And then I realize this story really was good. And I find myself telling the story to other people. I find myself talking to my husband. And then I'll talk to my sisters or I'll talk to somebody else and say, I just read this great book and here's what it was about. And
it just doesn't let you go.
Yeah. Yeah. You feel like there's something in it that just was really moving. And this was one of those stories.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. So now I want to talk about Biddy Mason. I want to talk about the woman that she was and the life that she built for herself. She came, as we said, out of enslavement. I love the way that you all framed this. You say that as an enslaved woman in Mississippi, she marches on foot alongside her owner's wagon train across the country to California, where she wins her freedom in court. With heroic determination and unearthly compassion for others, Biddy Mason works hard in Los Angeles, saves her money, transforming herself into a successful businesswoman and philanthropist. She builds schools, feeds the hungry, helps launch the first African American church, which we know as Fame, the landmark center of political and social action, earning the name of Grandma Mason here in LA. So talk to us about her life and what you all learned from her and what she means to you all, and more importantly, what you want people to take away from the production as they're watching.
I'm going to jump in. I love the fact that she was a midwife and she was a nurse.
And gave birth to thousands of babies.
Yeah. And she birthed all the babies that needed birthing. It didn't matter whose they were. She took what money she could get, but if you didn't have a lot, you didn't pay a lot, but she birthed your baby.
Yeah.
So there's something there that's so, she saw LA as her new community.
Yes.
And you take care of people in your community. You take care of people, and it doesn't matter who they are. You take care of them.
Yeah.
So consequently, she was very smart too.
Yeah.
But consequently, she ended up taking care of, her local people, most of whom at that point were Mexican. They were people who had come up from Mexico. And that's who was in L.A. And then who else was here? There were a lot of people here for the gold rush. She took care of them, too. Color, ethnicity was not the point.
Yeah.
She became good friends with Pio Pico, apparently, who was the ex-governor of Alta California, a very important person in L.A. and probably the wealthiest man in L.A. who owned the Pico House Hotel, which still exists downtown L.A.
Yeah.
So she moved across different levels of society. Yeah. She just moved everywhere and just kind of took it on. She just took it on.
And you know what I took from her life, just in the short research that I did about her, is that she had to have some level of charisma to her, right? Yeah. Because usually it takes charisma to be persuasive. And the way that her life unfolded, she was able to persuade people into relationship with her. And coming into relationship with her, she was able to get what she needed, not just for her, but for the people she intended to help. Because you don't go from enslavement to one of the wealthiest women in Los Angeles by not being smart, as you just said, right? So talk to us about, Dana, what did you see in her that you also see in yourself?
Oh, gosh, that's a tough question. But I'm deeply curious about just people and other people's lives. And I feel like there's something in Biddy that was similar in that, whoever you were, if she saw you. She saw whatever need you had.
Yes.
She addressed it or tried to.
She saw you and saw you.
Right. And I feel like just as a writer, I'm always like, you don't want writers at your parties or whatever because they'll tell on you. But I'm always just like, that's been me my whole life, that observer. Mm-hmm. And also, I feel like that empathy is really important. Just being empathetic toward others. I see that in her.
Yeah.
And, just something cool, like something like her learning to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yes.
Like just her saying, I need to know you. I need to access you as a human through your language.
Yes.
Let me try to do it that way.
Yes. Yes. Because that meant there were more people she could communicate with.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely. So, I don't know. I feel like Biddy's life is so big and she had big shoes. I don't like talking about myself in relation to her, but there is that legacy of like, well, I am here because of several types of Biddies in my family's line that got us here.
Absolutely.
And so just to think about those people embodied in someone like Biddy is really important.
Yeah. 100%. And what I also took from her life is that even in being enslaved, and I said this a different way before, that she may have been enslaved physically, but she was not enslaved mentally. You clearly could tell that she was not enslaved mentally because the first chance she got to fight for her freedom, she did. And again, just being persuasive and as charismatic as she was, she convinced them to set her free in court. And it's just something to be said about that, right? Listen, when we come forward, we're going to extend to you the invitation to come and see this amazing production so that you too can experience the story of Biddy Mason. I am Mischa Duffie. I am in conversation with the amazing Dana Johnson and Annie Loui. This is KBLA Talk 50. Yes, you are listening to the backstory. Welcome. In case you are just joining us, I am Mischa Duffie. My guest is Dana Johnson and Annie Loui, and we're talking about the life, the story of one Biddy Mason. Before the break, we were talking about just who Biddy was in her life, and I wanted to give Annie the opportunity to just share with us some of the story of Biddy's freedom and how she ended up becoming free. We talked about she went to court, but can you talk a little bit more about what that court case was like?
Yeah, she ended up meeting up with some people, some free blacks, as they were called then, in LA. And they said, there's ways to get around this. We can help you. We'll give you some information. And she was like, I'm not sure what that's going to mean. What's that going to mean for my children? I need to keep my children with me. So in the end, there was sort of an illegal posse that got together and stopped the Smith wagon train. And Biddy was part of the Smith group, and said, you know what? You guys aren't going to leave town because that Biddy Mason, we've got a writ of habeas corpus, and that Biddy Mason needs to stay here because she's contesting that you're taking her over state lines without actually permission. So the judge in the court case ruled, he just said, I'm sorry, California is a free state. And so as far as I'm concerned, this woman is free and free forever, as are her family, and you were going to take her to Texas, to a place where slavery still exists. And it was without the permission of any of them. That's not fair. Yeah. So I'm sorry, Smith, you're out of luck. And in fact, at the end of the court case, he made Smith pay all the court fees.
Wow. Smith was her master, and the judge made the master pay all of her court fees.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. That was the big finale. And this judge, I think, was very proud of what he did, because I found a letter in the research I did later at the Huntington Library that was from the judge to another friend saying, I just made a very important statement in a case that I think needs to get published in the newspaper. Now, which newspaper do you think it should go in? Yeah. So this was a big question in California at the time, and he had a very strong opinion. Yeah.
And there's a line in my story about something, I don't remember my own story exactly, but I remember writing something like California was this strange state where white people could get in trouble, you know.
Yeah, black people could get white people in
black
trouble.
People could get white people in trouble. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened, you know.
Yeah. Well, it was a beautiful thing that the judge came alongside her to say, this is what's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do the right thing. And I tell you, if we could have some more of that happen in 2024, good God Almighty, we would all be free on a whole nother level, because even as we said, I'm going to digress for a moment, as we were talking off the mic about this election coming up and all that's at stake with the election coming up, and how regardless of how you feel about Biden, the option of a Donald Trump is just so nauseating and just so disgusting that I don't know how we can't get beyond that, beyond the black and white of it, beyond the who is older and who is not, to understand that our democracy is on the line in a way that it's never been. Because I just personally agree, if that Donald Trump guy get back in that White House, y'all are not going to be able to get him out of there. And he is going to turn that presidency into something we have never seen before in this country. So hat goes off to the judge who freed Biddy Mason,
who knew the right thing
to do and wanted to be on the side of doing the right thing. And I promise you, y'all, we all have to rally together to make sure that the right thing happens in November of this year, because otherwise this place is not going to be a good place to live in.
Agreed.
At all. Would you all agree?
Yep,
100%.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, that said, right now it is a good place to live in. And part of the reason America is a great place is because we have creatives like you who tell beautiful stories and expose people to these beautiful stories. I want to now pivot and talk about the young people who have been blessed to see this production this week and their responses to it.
It's been really heartening. Because they do a little talk back at Inner City Arts after every school show, and we saw 1,000 kids this week.
Wow. Yeah. So 1,000 kids who did not know about Biddy Mason now knows about her.
Yes.
Dana, thank you. Dana, thank you. Annie, thank you.
Yeah. Well, it felt important to share. And they were saying that. The kids were afterwards saying, you know, I didn't know this.
Yes.
I didn't know this.
Yes.
This is cool.
Yes.
So,
yeah. And you know, at a time where we have people like the governor in Florida who's banning books and trying to just whitewash Black history. I can't thank you all enough for this piece. And you, even Annie, you know, being a white woman and saying, I want in on this because stories matter and the truth matters, and it doesn't matter who it is. The truth is the truth, and I want the world to know this story. We thank you for that, because this is how the stories that are being banned are going to be told, that we have to take ownership of telling them against the odds, right?
Absolutely.
Yep, agreed. And thank you for thanking me, because I thought long and hard before I picked this one up, because I really wanted to tell this story, and I thought, do I have the right? You know, got a really good dramaturg who was African American and knew what he was up to, and had a really candid conversation with Dana and just said, what do you think? Can I do this? She said, yeah, I think you're sensitive.
Yeah, exactly.
This isn't going to be a problem.
Right.
I'm like, good, because it's the point of Biddy's story now is that there weren't boundaries, you know, and
how about that?
It wasn't, things weren't.
She didn't put herself in a box. She didn't allow herself to be placed in a box.
Exactly.
You know, at one point, enslavement was her box, but I imagine that even while there, she imagined the life she could have outside of the enslavement box. Do you think so, Dana?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because she took a hold of it so quickly. Once she was free, to me, there was some premeditation, if you will, of once I get out of here, I got a plan for my life.
And not just her life, but so
many other people's lives. And I feel like even as a midwife, she's still giving birth.
Yeah.
Yep.
Even in death,
Yep.
she is still giving birth, because think about the fact that we know her.
Yep.
These children now know her, and the audiences that come to these productions will know her. And what that will give birth to remains to be told.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well
it
said.
remains to be told. Yeah. Let me also say this. I can't leave without sharing one of Biddy Mason's famous quotes. She says, if you hold your hand closed, nothing good can come in. The open hand is blessed, for it gives an abundance even as it receives. And I want to thank you all for giving us this offering. We receive it. It's been a joy to be here in conversation with both of you.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Really.
Absolutely.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Listen, up next, right here on KBLA Talk 1580 is Cafe Mocha with Yo-Yo Lonnie Love and Angelique Perrin. I want to just say before we go, the play is going to be at the Rosenthal Theater on Friday, May the 31st, and Saturday, June the 1st. Both shows are at 8 o'clock. Make sure you get out and see them. You can buy your tickets off of the website. Again, I am Mischa Duffie. This is the backstory. Until next week.
And I'm going to just add in, the website is the Fountain Theater.
Okay.
So go to the Fountain Theater .com and look up Biddy Mason.
You got it. You got it. Listen, until next week, stay grateful, stay safe, stay kind, and remember to dance with joy. I love you.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.